as I said. Infinity, for example, which we'll never see. Everyone can sort of say, yes, I understand what it is. But even simpler than that, and easier to see, is our language. Every word we use is a concept. We can say chair. We can look at this chair or any other chair, wooden, metal, a bench type chair, all kinds of chairs. And we can say, yes, chair, and we know what a chair is, or table. Or we can see one color blue and another color blue, different shades of blue, and we can say, yes, I know what blue is. But no one has ever seen chairness. No one has ever seen blueness. Do you see? It's a concept. The animals don't share that with us. They can see the object. They can see this object, and a cat can understand within itself, with no words of course, that it can jump on this object. But in a million years, as far as we can tell from any evidence ever given by the animal itself, the cat doesn't say chair and table. You see? It just sees the object, the percept. We have the ability to conceptualize, and that is abstract. You see that? Chairness doesn't exist, does it? Any more than the point exists. It is, but it is abstract, and we are abstract in ourselves, and that's why we can do it, you see. Because we are that abstract nature ourselves. When our mind turns in that direction, we call it buddhimanas. Now our mind has an ability to do exactly the other way round. And this we share with the animals, with the cats and the dogs and all the other lovely creatures of nature. We can turn the mind outward toward the objects of sense. And when we do that, it is immediately enmeshed in the emotional nature, called kama, K-A-M-A, in the Theosophical philosophy. Not karma, K-A-M-A. It means craving, desire nature. Now, that has been thought of as something we must stamp out. It's true and it's not true. Because if we didn't have that part of our nature, we'd never do anything. It's partly the motivating force within us. And in one sense, the universe itself acts out of kama, the divine desire, you might say, to express itself. So we must understand something about kama before we say we have to stamp it out. It isn't really the principle we must stamp out. But when mind turns outward towards the objects of sense, it becomes identified with them. And it's right in between those two functions of buddhimanas and kamamanas, right in between, that Blavatsky says the personal ego is formed. Now, we're going to say a lot more about that in the last class on self-transformation, but suffice it to say now that probably, now this is me, I've not read it in Blavatsky, but maybe it's there, but it's my understanding. It's very likely the reason that happens there is because the moment consciousness turns outward, there is a strong sense of I and not I. Isn't that true? The very fact that we look out gives us a strong sense of I or not I. Don't you think in meditation, perhaps one of the reasons most people close their eyes is because it shuts out that distraction of I and not I, and one can get a sense of the universal more easily without seeing the I and the not I, you see? So that gives us a strong sense of me, and then that so-called personal ego develops, having a function in the process, but in the long run having to be destroyed. Now, kama is the next principle, and kama connected with mind might be, I think Blavatsky calls it the animal soul. Now, if we want to talk about the spiritual soul, we're talking about buddhimanas, you see, that aspect of our mind which turns toward the atma buddhi. If we want to talk about the animal soul or the personality or the personal soul, then you're talking more about kamamanas, that aspect of us that gets identified with the thinking, feeling nature. You can't really separate them, actually. Thinking and feeling go together, absolutely together. You can't have an isolated feeling without thought, even if it's subconscious thought. And you can't have an isolated thought without some feeling. So kama is the craving nature, and it's part of a universal order. It's not just part of human beings. Animals have craving, and even plants to a certain extent exhibit it by their, can we dare say, desire to get water or light. It isn't quite, I don't want to anthropomorphize plants, but there's something of that quality everywhere. And in human beings, we have craving not only for physical things, we have craving even for beautiful art, beautiful music. It isn't bad, you see. It isn't good. It's part of our nature. It's when we become identified with it that all hell breaks loose, as it were. The next level we might call prana, vital energy, so that we can experience that as vitality in our being. And Blavatsky says it's not individual. I find that very interesting. It's as though she feels it's a sort of an energy that runs through us, like the air comes in and goes out, you see. And it is that prana that's used in healing very often. People, when we bump our knee or something or hurt our arm, isn't it a universal reaction that we touch it? We put our hand on it. I've often thought maybe we understand subconsciously that there's a kind of an energy always flowing through the hand, and somehow it helps a little bit, doesn't it? So that's prana. Now that expresses itself through what's called the, a Sanskrit mouthful, linga sharira, spelled L-I-N-G-A-S-A-R-I-R-A or S-H-A-R-I-R-A. It's a transliteration, of course, from Sanskrit. And the later literature had I think, an improved term here. They called it the etheric body. But in any case, whatever we call it, this is in the nature of a force field. You know, if you take iron filings and put them on a piece of paper and put a magnet under it, they all line up, don't they, along the lines of force. We all know that. The linga sharira, or the etheric body, or the etheric double as it's sometimes called, or in Blavatsky's terminology occasionally called the astral body. Later literature used kama for astral. The force field in this case is dynamic. It's moving. It's changing all the time. It is that which is there first in the womb. And it is around that the physical atoms and cells and organs, you can almost say, accrete. You see, like the iron filings. That's what holds them together, that etheric field. But it's a dynamic one. You see, it's growing and changing. So in a sense, physically, at least, and I think otherwise as well, we are our karma. It isn't we get it from outside. We are it, you see, because that field is the production of the past, in a sense. It comes out of the actions and the forces and the powers of our own past, created unconsciously by us, because God knows if we did it consciously, we'd have done it differently. But it's created by us nonetheless, according to this philosophy. And then, of course, finally, we have the physical body, which needs no explanation from us in terms of knowing we have it and dealing with it every day. But nonetheless, it is critically important, I feel, that we understand that this physical body is the vehicle for all of the principles. Every single one of them is revealed here in this body. So we must never denigrate the physical world. This universe went into an enormous amount of trouble, if we can put it that way, to create this visible universe. How dare we say it doesn't matter, that we want to be spiritual and pay no attention to the physical? This is nonsense from a theosophical point of view. This is the end product. Well, not end because there's no end, but it's the outermost revelation of this whole process. It's that toward which the universe has been moving all this time, to reveal all those principles in the exterior world, you see. And so St. Paul said very wisely, the temple, the body is the temple of the living God. It's very interesting to me, that. And I think we must always remember, and Gautama Buddha pointed out that enlightenment can occur only while we are incarnate in this physical world. Why? Well, I daren't guess what Gautama would have said, and so I won't. But I suspect he might have meant that we can't be enlightened unless all 7 principles are active together, you see. Then we understand how the whole thing fits together. That's enlightenment. Really comprehend it in ourselves, not just believe it. And that is perhaps the reason why in this physical body only enlightenment can occur, because after death, of course, the body is gone, the prana is gone, and the linga sharira soon goes. But the process of dying and the process of in-between incarnations is a rather lengthy one, and I only want to allude to it now, to say only that after the death of the physical body, the prana has gone, the physical body begins to disintegrate, and the linga sharira, or the model body, also disintegrates, at once with cremation and more gradually if the body is buried. Those principles go rather quickly, but we're still ourselves inwardly. And that's how we identify mostly anyway, isn't it? With our feelings and thinking and all that. We think of our body when it's hungry or when it hurts or whatever. Otherwise, we don't so much, do we? We live in our feelings, don't we, most of the time. And there we are still living in that world called kama loka, the world of desire. And we progress gradually through various stages until finally the essence of our being is all that's left. That beingness, that real self, the wisdom behind it, and the ability to know it, to be it, remains. And then, after a very long, incalculable period in some cases, the incompleteness of it asserts the necessity, in a way, to push forward for a new experience, and the process of reincarnation begins.